والله خير الرازقين.
من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها فإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد. My brothers and sisters, the topic of today's khutbah is of the utmost importance to each and every one of us because it represents a journey that is inevitable for all of us, and it's a journey that is a real test of Iman. And that journey, its starting point is when the journey begins, and that's when the test begins, and that's death. Because death will come to each and every single one of us, and it will come at a time when we do not know, and it will come at a time that we cannot predict, and none can predict. But what is certain is that it will come. You will be washed, you will be shrouded, and you will be buried, if Allah Azza wa Jal wills, by your loved ones. And that's a fact. In some way, you will perish. And this dunya that we are in, this dunya will seem like nothing. Because that is when your Iman, that is when your faith, your journey of Iman will begin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. And the individual, every soul shall taste death. And the journey that an individual goes through is of 3 stages. The journey in the dunya, this life, and the life is called the dunya because it is close. They say the dana, from the verb dana, to come close in Arabic. The life that is close to us, the life that is tangible to us. And when you look at something up close and you look at something in detail, it can be that you forget and you oversee the bigger picture and you don't see the reality of what's going on around you. And there's a saying in English that they can't see the wood for the trees. And this is what that saying means. That they're so busy looking at the tree, they can't see the wood. They can't see the forest that's around them. And this is like the dunya. Because if the individual is concerned about their livelihood, about accumulating, amassing wealth, then they forget the bigger picture. And woe unto us for being deceived. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran al-Kareem, where He says, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ. Amassing wealth, amassing books, amassing collection, amassing status in the dunya. All of this amassing, gathering, hoarding. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ. It has made you negligent. It has made you oversee, or it has made you not aware of the reality of the life that you're living, because the individual will be consumed, because it will never be enough. The job that you have now, it will never carry the status that you need, or that you think you need, or the money that you need, or the money that you think you need. The car that you drive now, it will never have enough horsepower, or it will never be technically sophisticated enough, because there are always these innovations. And by Allah, the Prophet ﷺ went to a marketplace, and there was a dead rotting carcass of a sheep. And he said to the Sahaba, which one of you would benefit from this dead rotting carcass? And this was in Medina, so in the heat, so it must have been disgusting. And the Sahaba said, none of us, because we can't use its meat. We can't even use its skin. It's decaying. It's got maggots in it. It's disgusting. The Prophet ﷺ said, the worth of that sheep body, is like the worth of the dunya to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this thing that we have in front of us, that we make the be-all and end-all, is not the be-all and the end-all at all. Rather, it's the starting point. And it's a means to the be-all and the end-all. And for this reason, the Prophet ﷺ, he gave advice to Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, where he said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib." Be in the dunya like you are a stranger, aw abir as-sabil, or a wayfarer. And the person who doesn't take the dunya as their final abode, they don't invest in it wholly. They don't take it as their place of permanent residence. Rather, they know that they're passing through it, and they prepare for the next steps. And when we think about these concepts, the dunya, death, being buried, being washed, the salah, even the announcement, it's something that's scary because it's not tangible, we can't see it. But as Muslims, our iman, it gives us the faith that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they told us about the trials and tribulations and the things that would happen. And for this reason, the people who have iman in the ghaib, in the unseen, they are praised in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who believe in the ghaib and they establish the prayer. So they are praised in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I mentioned, when death comes, it comes without any warning. And for some of the individuals, we see that death will overtake them while they're in the middle of an action. He died while putting his sock on to go to work, as though he was going to live. His lunch was ready, but he could never eat his lunch, and it was never written that he would eat his lunch. They died, tragically, suddenly. Their holiday was booked, their dream holiday that they'd always wanted to go on, but they're not going to go on it. She died with those savings in the bank account. But those savings, what do they mean? Once she is gone. This is the value of the dunya, and this is the nature of the dunya. And the dunya with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthless. And for this reason, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he advised us and he said, كَثِّرُوا ذِكْرَ حَادِمَ اللَّذَّاتِ. Remember, or make often your remembrance of the destroyer of pleasures, i.e., think frequently about death, because the individual, death can strike you at any moment. And for the one who is not prepared, or the one who hasn't prepared in their lifetime, this is a calamity. And there is no calamity that will be worse than this. And from the means of remembering death is visiting the graveyards. And visiting the graveyards and looking at the dates on the stones is sobering. Because you will see on one of them that there was a child who died, who was below the age of 5. And you'll see on another that there was a woman who died, who was 70 odd, and another who was 65, and another who was 43. So your age isn't guaranteed. The fact that we have elders among us and they have reached an elderly age, this is from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that we should thank Allah Azza wa Jal for. All of us, we all know people who have left. And if we live longer, you will see people who will leave. And then the nature of the hayat al-dunya will hit you. And you'll realize that what is important is a preparation for the real life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that indeed the akhirah, the hereafter, this is the real life. The hayat al-dunya, it's not that mata'ul ghurur. it's nothing but a deception and an illusion. Why is it a deception? Why is it an illusion? The sweetnesses and the things that we taste of this dunya, they aren't complete. This is the nature of the dunya. So when you get that car or you achieve that job that you think will fulfill you, you will find that it won't fulfill you because it's incomplete. What will fulfill you in this dunya is when you strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those around you. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he advised to remember and think frequently about death. And he also advised, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, كنت نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور ألا تزورها ألا فتزورها فإنها ترق القلب وتتبع العين وتذكر الآخرة. The Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, I used to prevent you and command you not to visit the graves. This was because the mushrikeen had embraced Islam they were new to Islam. So those practices that they had where they used to worship the graves, there was still an element of that, or there was time that it needed for that to go. So for a period of time, the Muslims were ordered not to go to the graves. But then he ﷺ said, but now I order you to go to the graves, because indeed they will soften your hearts. They will make your eyes shed tears, and they will remind you of the hereafter. Because, my brothers and sisters, that's where we're all going to be. And it may be that there will be an announcement made on Yawm al-Jum'ah that you have passed away. And it may be that the congregation here will be the congregation that will pray your Salat al-Janazah. So the importance of community ties, the importance of relationships, we see it from that. Also, as relates to visiting the graves, this is something highly recommended, and it's recommended for men and women. But for women, the Prophet ﷺ said that indeed Allah curses the women who frequent the graves. So for women, the hukum is that they shouldn't frequent them. It's permitted that they visit them, but not frequent them and go to them very, very often. And it's the sunnah that when we go to the graveyard, we say a dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught us. And this dua has importance in this place. Ask yourself, what's the dua? Answer in your heart, what's the dua when I go to the graveyard? And if you don't know it, then start visiting the graveyard more and learn this dua and think about this dua and contemplate over this dua. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, Ahl al-Diyari, people who are in their abode, min al-Muslimin, from the Muslims, wal-Mu'mineen, and the believers. Inna, indeed we, insha'Allahu, by the will of Allah, inna insha'Allahu, bikum lahiqun. Inshallah, we're going to be with you. We're visiting you now, but soon we're going to be there with you. Subhanallah, this is the reality. This is the reality of the dunya, and how quickly it goes, and the fact that none of us are promised tomorrow. I mentioned where the Prophet ﷺ advised Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, be in the dunya like you are a stranger. As a result of this advice, Ibn Umar, when he reached the evening, he didn't expect to reach the following morning. He didn't bank on it. When he reached the morning, he didn't bank on reaching the evening. And it's been reported that Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, he used to gather the scholars every night, and they used to revise and talk about death and the qiyamah, and they would weep, and they would weep like there was a janazah in front of them. This, my brothers and sisters, is the reality of death. This is the reality of what we are facing. And I conclude the first part of this khutbah with the words of one of the righteous scholars who came before, who would give advice to the Muslims, Hamid al-Qusayri, who said, indeed we as Muslims, we are all certain that death will come. But how many of us, and why is it that we don't see those who are preparing for death? We as Muslims, we all have faith in the Jannah, but why is it we don't see those who are willing to take action towards the Jannah? We as Muslims, we have no doubt about the fire and that the fire exists. None of us have. So why is it that we see so few of us who truly fear the fire? When death comes, it's the first of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises to you. And when it touches you, if it is good, then that which comes afterwards is good. But if it's evil, then what comes after that will be very, very difficult and very, very bad. So, my beloved brothers and sisters, hasten to your Lord fully and completely, with your hearts, with your minds, with your actions. Hasten to Him before death overcomes you. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد. Talking about death and the occurrence of death is something that's scary. It's something that's uncomfortable. And it's something that, in actual fact, nobody really wants to talk about. Because there's a finality to it. Because when you're buried, life will go on. Your beloved ones, of course they'll be sad. And life won't be quite the same. But life will go on. So it's a difficult topic. And it's a topic, as I said, that is scary. But the individual who benefits from it is the one who prepares for it. The individual who benefits from it is the one who prepares for it. But the individual who is scared of death because of the dunya, because they fear leaving the material world, this isn't a part of Iman. Because the believer believes that there is a hereafter. And the believer believes that there is potential for them to achieve a life that is better for them in the hereafter than the hayat ad-dunya. So the believer whose heart is awake pays heed to the message of death and they prepare for it. And in summary, my brothers and sisters, we prepare for death as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us an advice to do so. And this could be the topic of a whole entire khutbah. But I will restrict it because of time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. And take your provisions. What does that even mean? When it means take your provisions, when you're going on a journey, such as a journey of life, you take the things that you need. Yeah? If you're going to go in a car, you put petrol in the car. You take some snacks, you take water, you take tissues, that's your provisions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in your journey, take your provisions. Take the things that you need that will enable you to be successful on your journey. وَخَيْرُ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. And the best provision is having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is having fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a fear that doesn't cause inaction. The Muslim, when they're reminded about death, it doesn't cause them to be petrified, to be scared to an extent where they don't act. Rather, it does the opposite. It makes you move. It makes you realize what you should do. And the best of provisions is having taqwa. And this consciousness of Allah, it enables you to do two things. To act in accordance, to obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, upon a light from Allah, seeking the reward of Allah. And the second thing, it makes you stay away from the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited upon a light from Allah out of fear of the punishment of Allah. And under this, there are righteous actions. Because it's been mentioned that there was a man who passed away. And this man had 3 friends. One of those friends was his best friend in the dunya. He was always calling this person, always after this person. When he was in that person's presence, that he was his sole focus. And when he wasn't in his presence, His heart and mind was with this friend, his best friend. The second one was a friend who, this man, he was there when he needed them. You know, when there was a need, either way, they would have each other's back. But preferably, his heart and his mind would be with number one. The third friend that he had was a friend that he would go to as a last resort. You know, if number one, you know, he'd had enough of number one and he couldn't quite fit number one in, or number one couldn't fit him in, and then number two he couldn't fit in, number two didn't need anything, then he'd resort as a last resort to number three. So this man died and was buried, and these friends came to visit him. The first friend said to him, "You were my friend in the dunya, and now you're dead. Now you're gone. I can't benefit you anything." And he walks away. The second said, "You gave me my due in the dunya. You stood up for me. When I needed you, you were there. So, I've washed you. I've helped wash you. I've helped shroud you. I've helped the janazah. I've helped bury you. You're on your own. The trials and tribulations that you face now, you're on your own, and you will be questioned." The third friend, and this was the friend that was the lowest. Only if he had time, he would give a bit of his time to his friend. This one said, "Indeed, you had 3 friends in the dunya. You treated me the worst. You gave me the least of your time. You gave me the least of your importance. And today you've died. But today, I'm going to be with you, and I will never ever leave you. No trial that you will face alone. Nothing that you go through from this point you will face alone." And he climbs in the grave with him, and he's buried with him. The first of these friends, my brothers and sisters, was wealth, the dunya. He was always after the dunya, and the dunya will not benefit him. The second of these is the family. He gave the family the rights, and the family gave him his rights. But then after this, their help was limited. The third of these friends were his actions, his righteous actions. The righteous actions that we fit in when it's convenient for us. The righteous actions that we fit in when in our spare time. But these righteous actions, they will be with you when you're in the grave, when you're alone, when there is no one to help you. And this time will come because we will all be in the grave and we'll all be alone. And we will wish that we had the opportunity for one more Jum'ah, one more Salah, one more sajda, one more pound that we could put in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these actions, the recitation of the Quran, the fasting of Ramadan, they will be intercessors for you on the day of Qiyamah. They will come and they will argue on your behalf. They'll be the best backing for you, better than any family. Your family will run away from you. You will run away from them. Better than anyone. They will back you up. These righteous actions. And we benefit from this, that the actions that you do and the reward for them will outlast everything that's material in this world. Because on the day of Qiyamah, everything will be raised, everything will be destroyed. But what will remain are the righteous actions. And the righteous actions of an individual will come and argue on their behalf. They'll be weighed on your behalf. So by Allah, the salah that you are about to pray, be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it. Because there will be a day when we are all in the grave and we'll wish that we could do it again. So return to Allah, ayyuhal mu'minun, la'allakum tuflihun. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to make the dunya the sole aim of us in this world. I ask Him to enable us to make the dunya a means to gain close to Him in the akhirah. I ask Him to enable death to overtake us when it is best for us. I ask Him to give us tawfiq to help the Muslims oppressed all over the world and to give that concern within our hearts. I ask him to forgive us our shortcomings and enable us to put into perspective what we do. I ask him to bring us together as a community and to enable us to unite upon Tawheed and upon Sunnah. I ask him to enable us to help one another and help raise our children in a good Islamic way so that they can face up to the challenges that face them. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك وأنعم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وأقيم الصلاة.